Piano black trim is becoming more and more common in the automotive industry. For example, something like this Rivian R1S has quite a bit of this piano black trim. Here on the B pillar, the A pillar, the whole window surrounds, even under the mirrors, as well as up on the roof spoiler. While this looks really awesome when properly polished, when it's scratched up or improperly polished, it looks absolutely terrible. So today I'm going to take you through all the steps, my technique, the whole process, product and tools, and how to get your piano black trim looking absolutely perfect. Welcome back to another out of spec detailing video here from Clear Detailing in Northern Colorado. Let's jump into it. Before we jump into an actual demonstration talking about piano black and how to actually fix it properly, we need to understand a little bit more in depth about this actual material. You guys hear me talk a lot about soft, non-metallic black paints, either from Tesla or Porsche or GM products. They can be very challenging to cut and polish and get a very consistent result because they are so soft. When I talk about a soft paint, typically this means when you come in on your first initial stage, compounding it, you produce a lot of haze. Now, typically you can get deep scratches out very, very rapidly, but on the flip side, if you have hard paint, you really have to throw a lot of compound out to get the scratches out that are actually in there. Now, what really differs though is when it comes to polishing. Soft paint is very, very hard to refine because you have a lot of residue coming off of the paint. You're cutting into it quicker, you have more coming into the pad, which makes it harder to refine and makes DA haze. We'll talk a lot about DA haze today. Now, hard paint, on the other hand, really has no DA haze. You can quickly polish it and it looks absolutely perfect even after a heavy compound. So where does piano black sit in that? Well, piano black sits well below soft non-metallic black paint. This stuff is ultra soft. So let's talk about the challenges associated with this. Well, first off, these are typically in areas we interact with a lot as well. So here, like a B pillar, you get out of your Rivian here, you grab this, you close it. Your fingers are touching this. You may have rings on your fingers, whatever it may be. This being so extremely soft is very prone to deep scratches very, very easily. I've experienced this in the past where you take a brand new microfiber, there's a little dust on here, you wipe it and you go, what did I just do? It is genuinely that soft. So when we think about that, instead of coming in here with a crazy hard compound, just hammering it down and then spending hours and hours trying to refine it, we have to adjust our process a little bit more. And this is where I see a lot of detailers really struggle. Professional detailers hate dealing with piano black stuff, in all honesty. I've actually come to love it over the past 10 years of detailing because I have really focused on becoming an expert in paint refinement. That's really my main goal here at the business, is perfect paint, perfect piano black. And I have refined this process over and over and over with lots of fails and lots of hours doing it. So I wanted to share today with you on what my actual process looks like. So the process is very important on this, how you actually go about doing it, but your technique is just as important. Technique meaning the speed of the pad, the pressure you're putting on, the heat you're generating, as well as, you know, something like your compound and pad selection. All of these little attributes make this challenging. And if you do one of those slightly wrong, maybe you're running too high speed, which is going to cause a lot more heat, or you're not putting enough pressure in there, that's going to dramatically affect your results. There's nothing worse in having a full car detailed by a professional detailer. You pull it out in the sun and you go, this looks like crap. It looks gray, it looks hazy. You just have all of this DA haze. And I have been able to completely avoid this by the products, tools, techniques that I have actually honed in over the past couple of years. So before we keep going here, let's jump into this and talk a lot about what we're going to be using and what I like to actually do. So today we're going to be really focusing here on just this B pillar so I can show you a nice demonstration on it. I have my Scan Grip light here. This really helps me, of course, being indoors to actually see what kind of scratches are on here. This is a brand spanking new Rivian, and I am doing a new car prep paint correction and detail on it with ceramic coating. And this is how this truck was delivered. So you can see here, looking around this light source, you can see all of the rotary trails on here. You can see a bunch of scratches here from fingerprints. Even just me closing that in a demonstration earlier by touching this put micro scratches in it. That's how soft this stuff is. You can see on this edge here, lots of polishing haze. And again, this is very typical to what I see. I would say this is not super heavily scratched, but that will play into how we actually compound and polish that. So before we move any farther, I wanted to show you what this looked like before, and then we'll show you the final after results. So let's talk about the tools and products we're going to be using. Well, I have my detailing cart over here, and this is going to be very important to understand the different uses of polish to a medium polish, somewhat of a compound, and then a full-on compound. I've also got my two Rupes 3-inch machines. I like using 3-inch machines here on very intricate areas. I'll even use them here. This whole process that I'm going to do here, I do all over the window surrounds here, all under the mirrors, everything like that. So first off, we need to go in and compound or something similar. Now, this is typically one of my go-to compounds. This is MicroCut, and I have used this quite a bit in areas like this if it's a lot heavier scratched. But one of the issues with this is you put in quite a bit of DA haze. Now, one technique that I like to use, or one tool I like to use, is Meguiar's microfiber cutting discs. There's quite a few reasons for this than using it over foam. I do not use foam whatsoever when compounding vehicles, only for polish. And that, I think, is really important. The microfiber is a very, very distinct difference between foam. Typically cuts a lot harder, which you would be saying, okay, you're kind of contradicting yourself. Well, I would say, yes, I'm a lot more used to how microfiber works. Typically, foam holds in a lot more of that residue. So if you think about this, if you're compounding the paint here, you have microscopic layers coming off. That is going directly into your pad. If you use something like foam, all of that residue gets locked in the top of the foam pad. It's very hard to get out. So I actually use the blowout method, which Kevin Brown really came up with a few years ago. Typically what this means is you would compound a section here. So let's say we're working around this door handle. You would apply your compound to this, come in here, paint correct it, and then grab your pad, and you're going to use an air compressor here to blow out all of that residue, all the compound dust. That's going to give you a fresh, clean start every time you reapply compound and come back on the pad. Now this all varies if you're working on soft paint or hard paint, but it really changes if you're working on ultra soft areas just like this. So what I would say the best way to go about this would be is start with your least aggressive cut possible in your compounding phase. So in our example here, it's not super heavily scratched, so I'm probably gonna opt to go fine cut. Now I said this is more of a medium to heavy polish, but somewhat on the compound side. This is made by Koch Chemie. This is fine cut F601. I have really loved the Koch Chemie brand of compounds and polishes, but like I said, this is really my go-to compound. So what I'm gonna do is apply a little bit of fine cut to my microfiber cutting disc here. I'm gonna go in and check again with my Scan Grip. So I'd probably do a small section here, polish it or compound it in this area and check it and see, okay, did we get scratches out? What does the haze actually look like? This is gonna haze a lot more than this, which is gonna make our second polishing stage a lot trickier. Now, typically when I'm compounding on this, I will go for speed 4. And this is a big difference. The speed on this basically is how quickly it rotates. This is a random orbital machine, not a forced rotation machine. So it's very different. I find random orbitals to be my preferred use. I use Rupes exclusively instead of something like forced rotation flex polishers. It is just my preferred method. Now, secondly, let's talk about refinement. I've already actually have this one set up on setting number 2 here as far as speed. This is really my preferred speed for polishing. It doesn't create a lot of heat, especially on very soft areas like this, and it seems to work the best. Now, pad selection here is probably one of the most extremely important areas. Okay, so you would think about this as, okay, I'm trying to refine this. It's super soft. I'm gonna grab my softest pad that I have. Well, actually, soft, really soft pads such as the Rupes white pad may actually scour more than something like the yellow pad here. Now, I personally don't love in this area using a brand new yellow pad. I kind of like to break it in. So typically what I'll do, I've already compounded this entire Rivian. I would then come back and polish all of the green paint and then lastly come to the black. So the paint or the pad is actually pre-broken in. You can see here, it's got quite a bit of color in it. The edges are going, this makes it slightly softer. Now, the important distinction between the white pad and the yellow pad is, of course, this is a little stronger. What happens when you're actually polishing on here, if you have the white pad, it can kind of fold over itself and start creating these micro vibrations in there, where the yellow one really has a lot more support. This is very complex and important to understand, but that is where I really go after. So, for our actual polish, we are using MicroCut by Koch Chemie. I gotta tell you guys, this stuff has been a game changer. Now, these compounds and polishes are insanely expensive from Koch Chemie, but man, oh man, do they really showcase their work. I believe this is about a $70 to $80 bottle of polish here, but it works phenomenally. So this is one of the softest polishes they have. Now, when we talk about polishes, work time is very important. The abrasives are very important. For example, you can have some polishes that have what we call a long working time. What does that mean? Well, if I'm polishing this area, coming in here, polishing, we're still effectively getting the same amount of cut over that extended period of time. What I like to have is something called diminishing abrasives. This changes quite a bit with each polish. That's why I have probably about 25 different compounds and polishes that I actually use. Now, these diminishing abrasives, typically what happen is you come in here, you get a little bit heavier on the polish cut, and then it starts to degrade over time, i.e. the diminishing abrasives, very similar to this. Now, this one's kind of in between. This has a long working time. It cuts very quickly, but then kind of lays back, but you still have a long working time. And that's why I really love this. Importantly, with all of these polishes I actually use, there are 0 fillers in them. What are fillers? Well, essentially, let's talk more about the Haze here. If you were to come in and polish this with something like CarPro Essence, has a lot of fillers in it, it looks phenomenal. You wipe this down, you go, I freaking nailed it. And then you come in to ceramic coat this, you spray this down with isopropyl alcohol, all those fillers come out into your actual breakdown of your polish with your isopropyl alcohol, and now you have a completely hazy panel. It is truly wild to watch what a difference fillers make. Now, fillers are fine, but what happens is you take this vehicle outside, especially in the summertime, those fillers degrade immediately once it heats up. Think of like melting wax. It does the same exact thing. So you can polish it in here and it looks fine. You could even wipe it down or just put a coating straight over it. Then you take it outside and let it sit. And oh my God, all of a sudden, all of that polishing haze happens. I see this so often on non-metallic black cars. That's why I just say no more, not using any sort of fillers. Koch Chemie MicroCut is just the absolute business. So now that we understand our tools, a little bit more about the technique, let's get into actually cutting and polishing this. We're ready to go now. Now, importantly, I've masked up this bottom area. I think it's very important for detailers to not use painter's tape or something similar. Painter's tape sucks. Buy something that is actually worthwhile. This is what I like to use. This is made by CarPro. I'll leave this in a link in the description below. This tape is ultra thin, has really nice residue on the back. Now, one thing I do want to talk about. When you are polishing in areas, tape can dramatically affect your end results. So let's just say down here, we're polishing this area, the tape flips up. All of that glue underneath gets transferred into residue into the pad and now comes back up into here, causing scouring. So you'll notice here, I have not taped off this rubber. Typically, tape has a very hard time sticking to rubber. And I know this may be counterintuitive for a lot of people because I talk about this a lot when compounding and polishing cars, that you need to tape off plastics. Well, I do agree with that. There are certain cases where I just say, I'm not dealing with it because of that tape basically flipping up, picking up that glue into your pad, and now scouring it. This is how we get things called pigtails in our actual finished polish. So I'm gonna leave this completely open. This will get compound on it. I would rather have this go into the pad because it's a lot smaller abrasives than the glue from the tape here, and I can clean this later on. Rubber is very, very easy to clean. Okay, so we've got that out of the basis. I like to wear gloves with this. All of your hand oils can directly affect your polishing techniques. I know this all sounds insane. We're going on a very high level here. This is not really DIY friendly. Yes, I think a lot of people can do this with this technique, but this is really pro level polishing. So let's grab our Rupes here. We've got a fresh, clean compounding pad. So I'm going to grab my fine cut over here. I'm gonna shake this up a little bit. I'm going to apply 2 small drops here, about pea-sized drops on here. I'm not into priming pads. I just have never really found the use case for it. I don't use it. If you do, completely fine. I really don't think it's all that necessary. So I'm gonna break this into 2 sections. You may think I would go, okay, let's do this one first and then this one. I personally like to cut this in half, do the top, both sides, and then do the bottom. So I'm gonna do a quick demonstration here. I'm gonna react to what the cutting ability actually is. So I'm gonna cut it, look at it, and then adjust from there. So again, I'm on speed 4 here. We're going to use medium pressure and we're gonna kind of watch this with our scan grip headlamp here. If there's a deep scratch, I can see through the compound and go heavier in an area. So I'm gonna just do those quick passes there. You guys saw that in real time. I'm going to wipe this off and then importantly, grab my scan grip light over here. So I can see we put a lot of haze into here. And that's quite crazy thinking that we only just use a light polish. We still have a pretty hard compounding disc here. Now, this didn't pull a ton of black residue off of it. Why? Because we're not heavily cutting it. So that's really important to understand. So what I'm gonna do now is grab this, blow it out. That's basically what a blowout looks like. And I was noticing in here, we have some deeper scratches. So I'm going to go in one more time here. I'm gonna apply 2 small dots here with my fine cut. Come in here and really focus on this one side. This side is going to likely be more heavily scratched than this side. Why? Well, as I talked about before, a lot of people use this to close the door. You're not necessarily touching this so often. So I'm gonna work this in and let's turn up the speed ever so slightly, about a half turn, 4.25, and let's hammer this. So a couple things I want you to notice what I did there. I was using a little bit more pressure because I had this one area with this deeper scratch. Now I didn't actually get the scratch out, and this is important. So I'm gonna show you exactly what this looks like. So now we need to consider, okay, we've got most of this out. If this was heavily scratched, we need to bump up our compound, which is going to make our life slightly more tricky on the back end polishing it. So why all this is gonna start to make sense very, very soon. But let me bring you in here and show you before and after results. So here's how we're looking. Remember, this is our before down here. So you can see a few deeper scratches, one right there above my light source, one right below there. So as I move up, you can see how much clearer this gets. Now, what I want you to notice here though, is still the haze around the actual light source. It's very tricky to pick up. The camera has a heck of a time focusing on this, but it's faint. Now, if I come over here, this is that deep scratch I was talking about. So if I want to, or just say I have an entire panel with scratches like this, I need to now go, okay, bump up the compound. So we started light. That's always most important to do. You don't want to just hammer this thing. Don't grab your most aggressive compound. See what works. Again, these are all different materials. This is different from this, which is different from this, which is different from this. So a light polish on this that we just use here may get the deepest of scratches out here, but not on here, and that may be different from here. So it's really about testing. It's really, really complicated and very convoluted, but this is the process I go through. So you can see what a massive difference this made here, just refining all of this. So I'm okay with this. This haze is so easy to get out. So what I'm now going to do is mix. So I'm gonna take a little bit heavier compound, utilize 1 dot with that, and mix it with fine cut. That's gonna kind of bump up, not to a full compound, but we're gonna have some more cutting action of this, but a little bit more refinement of this. This is where this process gets so convoluted, is when I come in here and start mixing. A lot of the time, finish polish, I'll grab this and mix it with the purple MicroCut here to bump up that polishing ability a little bit more, but get the refinement of this. Very, very convoluted, I understand. I hope if you're watching this, you're a little bit more high level. If you're not, I still think this is easily available to understand what's actually going on here. So let's try this next section with a little ultra cut and our fine cut. So just blew out the pad there. I do that every time I take the actual machine polisher off, blow out the pad, get all of the microfiber standing back up. If it's kind of curled down like this, it doesn't really have the cutting ability. You want it to stand back up before it goes back on there. So like I said, we're gonna start mixing now. So I'm gonna put a little bit of ultra cut on here and a little bit of fine cut. Now, the amount of compound and polish dramatically affects what it's doing cutting wise. If you put a little, it's going to cut less. The more you put on there, to an extent, if you overfill it, it's going to just make an absolute nightmare. You don't just want to hammer compound on here, have stuff slinging everywhere. It doesn't take a ton. Typically, I'm a 2 dot type of guy. Sometimes on a bigger pad, when we go to a 7-inch pad, I'll do 4 dots. So 2 of each, whatever it may be. So let's hammer down this little section here. I'm going to focus heavily on the scratch I showed you here and work our way down. Now here is very important not to just come in and hammer this with this edge here. This is rotating at relatively high speed. Again, we're at 4. And this also oscillates. That oscillation can hit here. If you don't tape this up, you're gonna scour the crap out of this. These 90-degree sections in here can be very tricky to get in these light edges. So what you'll see me do when I come down here, I'll tilt this up, put a little bit more heat, a little bit more pressure in on this bottom area. Because if you're going here, you're not getting the full cutting ability of the actual pad. I also want you to watch during this demonstration where I focus time on. So I have a scratch right here. Down here didn't look all that bad. So what you'll see me do is probably work a little quicker here. Again, I'm watching through my headlamp through the compound to see the scratches, and I'll probably spend a little bit more time here. I may lightly lean into this. So let's get going. So probably one of the hardest things to showcase over video is the amount of pressure I'm putting on, and it really varies. So these machines, basically you want to keep this spinning. If you are in a recessed area like this, you are going to either need more speed, lighten up the pressure, or change your actual angle of your machine here. So this area, for example, has a slight bit of this. If I just angle it like this, it's not going to spin. It's still going to oscillate, but it's not going to spin. And you're going to focus a lot of pressure right on that one point, but you're not getting the full cutting ability. So when you see a panel like this that bows out, you are molding this flat piece to a rounded area. Something like a 911 with those really round hips, you have to get very creative with this. And then you come into sections like this, you have to get a little sideways, up, down, and you got to get just really intricate with it. It's kind of a feel thing. It is not the easiest thing to say. You apply 2.3 pounds of pressure. I'm just feeling it over time. So it's going to take a little bit for you guys, if you're trying this at home, to figure out pressure. So I would say on here, I used medium pressure. I'm not hammering this thing. I'm not trying to stall it. So if you can see here, this pad deflection here, if I do that, it really squishes it down. I'm also not wanting it to do this where it's walking around to where it's not consistently cutting on there. So that's very, very important. You also saw me in this single area here with the scratch. I leaned the machine up because I was trying to put more heat, a little more pressure, getting a little more cut in a concentrated area. The other important thing to understand about plastics versus paint is they heat up very differently. These tend to hot spot. They don't disperse heat as much. So if I'm hammering this spot, it's going to stay concentrated, which means you're putting a ton of heat into one area. That's how a lot of people burn edges here on things like this, is if you're just hammering this right here, you're putting a ton of heat here and it's not allowing it to disperse. Typically on paint, say you're hammering out this section, the heat is going to kind of slowly build out to the rest of the panel. So again, this is so next level in understanding, but that's what I think about constantly while doing this. So looking here, we got the scratch out, but we produced a lot more haze. Now, our refinement is going to work with us, and we're going to have to test. Again, we may have to start mixing now our polish if we had to step up to more of a compound. So we may need to add in fine cut to the micro cut to get these scratches out. We'll play and see how that works, but I want to show you exactly what this looks like now. So I've turned the lights off so I can show you guys this a little bit better. Very easy to see in person through my own eyes, but on camera it's a little bit more challenging. So again, this area we did not do anything with yet. Now over here, this is our compounded section. So look at the haze we put in here. Honestly, this is how I see a lot of people leave these areas. This truck looked completely like this from Rivian. They went in there, tried to polish things, and you can get a lot of polishing looking like this. Now I'm actually very happy with the amount of haze we have here. That being a few things. I let the compound work for a reasonable amount of time. I didn't over apply it. And I would say this is pretty much moderate here as far as the amount of haze. Now, if we weren't using fine cut in this, we would get a lot more haze, and it would again then be trickier to polish afterwards. So look at the major difference here though. You can see, let me try and zoom in, see if the camera can focus here. So you can see a lot heavier haze here versus up here. It somewhat looks the same while I'm looking here through the camera, but there is a massive difference. This is more coarse and this is more fine. So I would prefer to have more of this fine, but we had that one area that needed it a little bit more. So potentially what I may do while I'm hammering out this section here with just the fine cut is quickly hit this entire section, refine a little bit of that haze before we go to polishing. Just makes your life a little bit easier. But very happy with this. Just wanted to bring you guys in, show you a little bit more about what actually this haze looks like. And again, this is how a lot of people leave this stuff. To me, this is completely and absolutely unacceptable. Yeah, it looks great with the lights off like this. And yeah, you look at it, oh my God, it's so glossy. You turn the lights on in here. That's Instagram detailer stuff. That's not what we do. If my eyes can see it, it's there. Great, so I just quickly hammered this section out off camera and refined this a little bit more so it doesn't have as much haze. Didn't take a super long time. Now, next steps, since we're actually going into polishing now, I want to grab my product Geon Prep. What this is basically going to do is strip out the compounding oils here. Now this can be important because the oils left on here can now affect our polishing. So basically all you do here with a clean towel, come in here, wipe this on, has a lot of alcohol in it to break down those oils, simply wipes away. Just want to check this, make sure we didn't put any scratches in it, is looking good. So now is the big part. Anybody can do what we just did there. Now I would say a lot of you, when you're doing this, probably are going to put a lot more haze into this unless you get this really dialed in. Again, speed, pressure, heat, amount of compound, and the right compound and polish. So we're going to grab our polisher over here. Now again, as I said, I like to have a broken in pad here. I would refrain from taking a brand new yellow polishing pad and sticking it on here and trying to refine. It's going to be a little bit more aggressive. Now, yes, you can kind of contribute to this by maybe using less polish, but it makes it a little bit harder to get full refinement. So again, I'm going to split this up into sections. I'm going to do one side so you guys can see basically compound and then polish, and you'll see exactly what it looks like. But I want to do a test spot on this. So importantly, I need to make sure this is blown out as well. Good to go there. So I'm going to apply a little bit of MicroCut here. I'm going to kind of go far to the edges, not a ton. This is all you need. MicroCut is gray. Again, I'm on speed 2 here. I'm going to do this little test section up here, check how it looks, and then we'll see if we need to add in something, if we need to change something. So on to polish we go. All right, and the moment of truth here. Now, I would say it's more important when polishing to make sure you have a level application of pressure and you're not necessarily bending this up as much. Now, it is totally fine to do that, but you can lightly micro mar it in between. So I haven't even looked at this. Let's see our results here. So to me, it looks 90% there, but it needs more refinement. So what I'm gonna do, blow this out, and I'm going to add in some fine cut. Now, you may look at this and go, okay, I left haze in there, meaning that my polish was too hard. Now, typically this is completely wrong. Typically what you're doing here is not getting everything out. So if you bump up a little bit, and we're going to do a mid up step and basically mixing more of a medium polish and a light polish, we're going to see what that's going to affect. If I try this out and MicroCut and the fine cut doesn't get the desired results I want, I'm going to bump up one more time and go fine cut. So let's come back onto here and see how we do. And I think I can already tell through my headlamp here, we got that. Yeah. So let me take you guys off the tripod now and I'll show you some before and after results. I think you're gonna be blown away with this. And with that, let's check our results here. So again, over here, you can still see that little bit of haze. Now I will show you, you can see like right left there of the light source, there's a little bit of lint. You're gonna see that over here. But that is our final result. The camera is basically completely struggling to even focus on here. Now, again, you wanna make sure you wipe this down with isopropyl alcohol. check your work. No problems here. I've already done that in this section and it looks absolutely perfect. If you're using fillers, it will likely come back and look like this. But I hope you guys can appreciate how nice that looks. I bet most of you have never even seen piano black look that deep. Truly, it is not easy to get there, but with this process, this refinement, I think a lot of people can get very, very close to this. Again, speed makes a huge difference, and knowing when to change speed and knowing how much pressure to put on, how much product, this all is such a huge, large variable with this. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This was a fun one to make. I know it was kind of on another level than a basic kind of DIY. Here's a few steps. This was really in depth, really in my head, in my brain about how I actually polish very, very soft areas like piano black. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll see you in another out of spec detailing video very, very soon. Bye-bye.